When people talk about taxes and real estate, you usually hear the shiny stuff. Bonus depreciation is back, using the short-term rental loophole to offset high W-2 income, travel write-offs, and hiring your kids, etc. But the reality is, none of that means much if you don't also do the boring parts that make them real. I'm in the process of doing my own year-end financial review, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and in today's video, I wanted to share what that process actually looks like, and the few things I've learned in the last few years doing these random side hustles alongside my main job as a pharmacist. I am not a tax professional, and I'm not you, so please don't use this as like a copy-paste of what you should be doing, but rather, by the end of this video, you should walk away with a few action items. Things to look up for your own case, documentation to start or tweak if you have been missing those, and questions to ask your own CPA. The first thing I want to talk about is using the short-term rental loophole, or more specifically this year with bonus depreciation coming back and how you can use cost segregation and do all that magic and get a huge tax write-off in that first year. When people talk about cost segregation, they're referring to a study that usually costs money to perform that breaks the house into different pieces. There's the structure, there's the windows, there's like the flooring and whatever inside of it. And instead of depreciating that whole property at the same speed, the cost segregation study allows the separate components to be depreciated faster. And in some cases, some of these items with 100% bonus depreciation coming back can be deducted in full in year one. For example, if you bought a $1 million home for the purpose of using it as a short-term rental, and obviously part of that 1 million, part of that is the value of land, but then within the value of the structure, there are parts like the fixtures, the carpet, that can be depreciated faster. And you're basically pulling those items forward so that initially in that first year, you could have this massive tax loss on paper. However, that tax loss is locked behind passive loss limitations unless you fit certain criteria. That is, if your short-term rental is on average 7 days or less, so you need to have some method of documenting that that is in fact the case, and then also you materially participate in the business. Or if you're a real estate professional or your spouse is a real estate professional. And this is one of my favorite examples of how some of these tax strategy ideas aren't real unless you can implement them. The magic is in the boring detail. Specifically for my case, I can comfortably say most of my rentals are like weekend or long weekend rentals at the beach house, and it would be really easy to pull just a spreadsheet for all the stays. So that's the days requirement. And then as for time tracking, I use Toggle and I just kind of turn it on in my app as I'm responding to a message or troubleshooting something. Or more recently, we had a guest talk about like a windshield damage on their car while they're parked near our property. That took a lot of troubleshooting. So the whole time I was doing that, I was logging the time. Other people have found simpler ways to do it too, using a spreadsheet, just writing it in their notes app. In my opinion, it's much less about the exact software or tool you use than just you having a habit to document these things. If you're looking to use cost segregation plus bonus depreciation together to generate this huge loss to offset your other income, it goes without saying all of your documentation to overcome the passive loss limitations is key. And also, doing a cost segregation study isn't always worth it. It kind of depends on how long you want to hold on to the property and whether pulling those depreciations forward is worth that cost of doing the study in the first place. I didn't do one and I don't regret it. The second strategy item I want to talk about is using any capital expenses or year-end big upgrades to offset your rental income. In a year where you're quite profitable, congratulations, but it also probably makes sense to take a look at how much of that is taxable income and whether there were upgrades and repairs and other capital expenditures you were planning on anyway, would it make sense to do it before the year ends to offset some of that tax burden? Obviously, this only makes sense if these are necessary expenditures that you're not actually just spending away your profit for the purpose of minimizing tax alone. And also, you can only implement this if you are actually reviewing projections before the year ends. And the only way you can quickly and efficiently look at projections is if your books have been clean and tidy and organized throughout the whole year. If you're looking for software to help with this, Baselane is a banking and bookkeeping platform built for real estate investors. And honestly, just the automatic importing of transactions and having these basic Schedule E friendly categories have already been really helpful in keeping things organized. More recently, I upgraded to their new Baselane Smart subscription, which adds this auto receipt matching feature so that I can just quickly upload a whole bunch of receipts without manually finding the right transaction to match them with. And it has this auto tag assistant for categorizing expenses with just the click of a button. Both of these really help keep my books clean with minimal effort on my end, so that when it's time for my year-end review, the records are already there for me to interpret and make decisions. And also, when tax season comes, you can just download this whole tax package in one click and hand it over to your CPA. If that sounds helpful to you, go check out Baselane at the link in the pinned comment, and thank you to Baselane for sponsoring today's video. The third tax strategy item I hear talked about often is travel expenses. Wouldn't it be so fun to have this business that is operating a short-term rental and you can bring your whole family there to vacation but call it a business trip? It's not exactly like that. You can't deduct personal trips. So in the event of an audit, how are you going to prove to the IRS that this was actually a business-related trip that was deductible? And that is, again, what I mean by the boring detail that makes these things work. What is the purpose of the trip? How many days did you go for? What did you do on those days? What business activity did you have? Did you meet with someone? Did you do work on your property? What kind of documentation do you have that is really what happened? Did you save the receipts? And if family came along for the trip, do they also have a business purpose, or are they here for personal reasons and therefore their expenses are not deductible? And then lastly, do you have a tax home for you to be traveling from? It is a lot of little things to try to remember to document, because I feel like this is beyond just my normal bookkeeping system where I'm attaching a receipt. There's also the who else is on the trip and what was the purpose? What did I actually do? And so I like to use my personal template that I created and I save it on ClickUp. And honestly, you can also use just a Google Doc, any sort of system that helps you keep organized, systematic, and something that you can use consistently. The advice given to me by professionals is to document everything as close as I can with respect to the date of the trip. So ideally, on the trip as I'm doing those business activities, or if not, right after when I'm home. Write down what I actually did, attach any receipts and any proof. Number 4, I want to touch on retirement accounts and other tax-advantaged accounts in the US. When people, especially I feel like in the real estate world, talk about reducing taxable income, they tend to go to the fanciest, wildest thing. And often these retirement accounts are overlooked because they are, truthfully, quite boring. And just real quick on my personal soapbox, the FIRE people tend to refuse to consider any other thing other than the retirement accounts. And then on the other hand, the real estate / crypto / business people totally roll their eyes at these retirement accounts and how they assume nothing can be taken out before age 65. Can we just have a bit of balance and just treat them all as the tools that they are? And you can pick and choose what fits in your life and deploy the right one based on your different goals, timelines, preferences, and that can stay fluid. Why are some people so extreme? Anyway, treat this as a reminder to review what is available to you through your work, or if you're self-employed, what those options can look like. What are the caps in the contribution? Make sure you understand what the pros and cons are for each type of account versus, say, real estate versus some other asset class, and make a plan that suits your short-term and long-term goals. I personally like to use Projection Lab because it shows me everything visually in graphical form, and I can see if I change one thing, how the whole graph changes. It's just beautiful and easy to read and easy to understand. On this channel, I feel like most of the time I talk about my beach house, Airbnb, and the long-term rental that I have in town, but I actually also do the backdoor Roth. I do a little bit of contribution into my 403b just to get the match. I have a bit higher of an amount that goes to a 457b, and I utilize the 529 accounts to just a little bit beyond what the state allows for a tax deduction. I'm not doing a solo 401k or a self-directed IRA for holding less common assets because it doesn't fit me. More obscure isn't better. Oh, and I also do an HSA. My point is there are so many low-hanging fruits in terms of ways you can optimize your taxes and reduce your tax burden without going into some of these really complex schemes that require a lot of documentation. The fifth strategy is hiring your own kids. I think I hear this one often, maybe just because of what the algorithm feeds me as a parent. And the general premise is if you have a business, the hires that you have, the contractors, employees, whatever, are tax deductions to your business. And on the other hand, your children receiving that income, they're most likely below that threshold of 14,000 or so. It changes every year, so look that up. That it won't be taxable income to them. And so you kind of get that tax write-off from your business, and your children don't have to pay taxes, and you don't have to pay like Social Security or Medicare taxes on that payment as well. Plus, it could be an opportunity to teach your kids like either about the business itself, about working in general, about the concept of money. It could be a really good thing, but this only works if you properly document what they're actually doing, what you're hiring them for, and you pay them a reasonable amount. Like you can't pay them $14,000 for the year for shredding papers in your office. Like that's not proportionate to the amount of work that they're doing. And it's also not the amount you would pay someone else to do if you were to hire this out. From the advice I've received from professionals for my own specific case, so please take that with a grain of salt, it's a good idea to log the kind of work they're doing, the hours that they have worked. It needs to be age appropriate, so my 3-year-old is not helping with bookkeeping. And ideally have some sort of support for why you're paying them the amount that you chose, either based on what freelancers outside would charge and adjusting for like more beginner level, a reasonable dollar per hour or dollar per project. There are probably multiple valid ways to do it. And the feedback I got actually was I was stressing too much about putting them into what format, what Excel spreadsheet. That part doesn't matter so much as did they actually perform work that is useful for the business. And was the whole thing justified? As an example, I currently pay my kids a very nominal amount for appearing on camera for some of our travel videos, or if I use their footage as B-roll in other videos. And I just have a clear Excel spreadsheet of the date that video was published, what the title was, and what their work was, which was being on screen, the amount I paid them, and the date I paid them. Just for being very extra, I do also have a short document listing what my expectations as the employer is for them being on screen. But from the feedback I got, honestly, that wasn't even that big of a deal. Another example I can give is we are actually thinking of working on creating like a kids guide to our beach house, created from a kid perspective for guests who are also children, like showing them where the best hiding spots are, cute recommendations on like the nearby playgrounds, stuff like that I think add a little bit of warmth and fun to the beach house property, which is a very family-friendly property and something I don't think I could do on my own. Right now, this is still at the idea stage and my kids are tinkering with Canva, playing with it, and I'm going to just reassess in like half a year and see if they have any interest in creating this with me. If from a tech perspective, this is not going to be a good fit for them, they might still be able to contribute to this final house guide for kids thing, but it would be in a different capacity. And I think having that clear assessment of why you're involving them as your employees and what is their scope of work and why you're paying them that amount, I think these would be really helpful in supporting that expense. Another example I have more on the content creation side is how I wouldn't just pay someone like $20 to set up my Final Cut Pro and to load all of my travel related video clips onto my computer, put them into a folder and open it into my editing software. Just set it up for me so it's ready to go when I want to edit. Such a simple task, but it takes me time because I'm like sitting here looking at these pictures and like airdropping it over. I'd be happy to pay a VA to do this, but a VA can't like access my phone and do the airdropping. So I'm thinking one day if the kids are interested, I would be more than happy to give that away and hand that project over. They can even go in and tag each of these videos. This one's for a hotel, this one is for food, this one is me talking to camera. and it would just make my life so much easier. But in this example, there is a genuine business need, there is a purpose. I would willingly pay anybody to do it, in or outside of my family, and I think it'd be age appropriate. The last thing I want to mention for my year-end planning is a little bit of reflection on the systems that worked well or didn't work well for this year, and how I want to tweak them for next year. Tax planning is not a one-time activity. It's more like a system of year-round habits. In looking back at what worked well this year, I think having software that automatically helps categorize and just import transactions was a really good baseline. I rarely had to go fish out something additional that didn't automatically transfer. Occasionally, if there was cash involved or if my husband was doing the paying, sometimes a few transactions needed to be manually added. But those I think are still done pretty timely, and he also knows the system of importing transactions. So overall, compared to previous years, I'm doing a lot less manual hunting down of any expenses. I've also refined my system for documenting travel-related expenses and time tracking. So all of that is kind of built into a habit now, and it's just smoothly occurring in the background. As for where I had to scramble this year, the quarterly taxes is kind of a new thing for me, and I think the deadlines are not intuitive. It's not exactly quarterly. Specifically, this has to do with the content creation business side. I am very fortunately making money, but with that comes quarterly estimated taxes, which as a W-2 employee for all my life, this was a completely new thing, and I just didn't have a good system to like remember the deadlines and going to do it. It felt really messy, and so I added some reminders for next year, and hopefully it goes a little bit more smoothly. Strategies are great, but documentation and systems are what make them real. Your homework after this video, once again, is not to copy me. It's to take this list and see what applies, and bring the right questions to your tax professional and or look up your own eligibility with your own situation. I'll leave a couple links to channels that I have found to be trustworthy and helpful down below as it relates to taxes. I have found it incredibly difficult to wade through like the potential BS and fluff. So it is actually really refreshing and comforting when I find those pieces of information that are easy to follow and more importantly accurate. If you have other tips, especially anything that I didn't touch on, please add them in the comment below, because I'm sure everyone is kind of approaching that year-end planning phase and would love to hear what else is missing. Don't forget to check out Baselane for your banking/bookkeeping needs, and I will see you again next time. Bye!